Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we take a closer look at the week's top political stories. Ballotpedia connects people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed. We're here to give you the facts so you can form your own opinion. I'm Victoria Rose, and thanks for being with us. Today, we're previewing a few of the special elections set to take place next week in Virginia and Mississippi. Here to help us unpack them is staff writer Joel Williams. Hi, Joel.
Hey, Victoria. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been a while since you've been on. How are things? How's your new year?
Oh, it's doing good. We were talking about resolutions right before this, and we're both Peloton people, and they have a 10,000 minutes challenge. It's like an annual challenge to work out for 10,000 minutes. So we'll be working towards that. I almost got it last year. Yeah, almost. Not quite.
I was at 9,000 this year, so also missed it. We'll hold each other accountable.
I know. I think I was like 2 or 3 hours away from getting it, and I looked and it was like the 31st. And my wife was like, "Oh, you could totally get that in the next 6 hours. Why aren't you doing it?"
That's great. Well, 2023 is an off year election-wise, meaning that we're not voting for the president. There's no midterms. Everything sort of calms down. There are some elections in November, but it's not as busy as the even-numbered years for us. But we do have special elections. So special elections can happen anytime and for all sorts of reasons, right, Joel?
That's right. And as I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, those reasons and procedures can vary depending on the state and also what office the election is for. But generally, special elections take place to fill a vacancy that was created unexpectedly. And that typically happens under 3 circumstances. The current office holder either retires, resigns, or dies.
Got it. So on this episode in particular, we're going to be discussing state legislative special elections. And so far, there have already been 15 scheduled for this year in 10 different states. Some analysis we ran here at Ballotpedia showed an average of 74 special elections per year between 2011 and 2021. So Joel, is there any difference in how many special elections we might see in an odd year versus an even year?
Yeah, there is. So big election cycles like presidential elections or midterm elections typically happen in even years. So there's more room on the calendar and in our heads for special elections to take place in odd years. Just also generally, too, there might be cases where someone's elected to a different office in a midterm year, and so their seat gets filled in a special election in the following year. And as far as how many typically happen in that same period you mentioned from 2011 to 2021, there's an average of 62 special elections per year in even years and 85 in odd years.
That's really interesting. Not all special elections are partisan, but we're covering state legislative special elections today, like I said, and those are. So I'm curious, what does our analysis tell us about how common it is for a seat to flip in a special election?
So since 2010, there's been 110 state legislative seats that change party control out of 848 special elections. So that's about 13% of these special elections resulting in a flip seat.
And next week, we're watching 4 state legislative special elections set to take place on Tuesday, January 10th in 2 states, Mississippi and Virginia. Only one of those elections is taking place in Mississippi and the rest are over in Virginia. So I figured we would start with Mississippi's House District 23, which is a special election to replace Republican Charles Jim Beckett. How did this seat become vacant, Joel?
So his seat has been vacant since September 22nd. He resigned from office. And I know that sounds like something bad probably happened, but he's actually just taking a new job. He was appointed the executive director for the Mississippi Public Utilities staff.
So how many candidates are on the ballot for that state house seat?
So there are 3 candidates on the ballot. Their names are Perry Van Bailey, Andy Clark, and Andy Stepp. And if none of the 3 candidates receives a majority in the special election, Mississippi will hold a runoff on January 31st between the top 2 candidates this time.
And then over in Virginia, there are 3 more special elections taking place, 2 in the state house and 1 in the state senate. Candidates running for special elections in Virginia are selected through firehouse primaries administered by each political party. So can you give a quick definition of a firehouse primary for those of our listeners who might not be very familiar with that term?
Yeah, so the term firehouse primary is just a term for one that's held, funded, and overseen by local party organizations rather than public election officials. So like in this case, rather than it being the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office or public election officials, it's the county Democratic Party holding the primary.
Let's start with House District 24. This vacancy was the result of the death of Ronnie Campbell, who passed away on December 13th. He assumed office in 2019. Joel, who's hoping to fill his seat?
So on the Republican side is his wife, Ellen Campbell, and she's running, in her own words, to further her husband's agenda and kind of continue his legacy in the chamber. Her competitor is Democrat Jade Harris, who's currently the vice mayor of the town of Glasgow. And I will just say, too, it's not super uncommon to see people's spouses run in these special elections for office, particularly when the former office holder is deceased. At the state legislative level, that's actually kind of a common thing.
Very interesting. How about the other House seat up for grabs in District 35? Democrat Mark Keem held the seat for over 10 years and resigned last September to take a job at the International Trade Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Who's running that race?
So the candidates there are Democrat Holly Seibold, who's a nonprofit leader and former elementary school teacher, and Republican Monique Baroudi, who's an IT professional and a former small business owner.
So 3 very interesting House races to watch across both states. And the race for Virginia State Senate District 7 should also be really interesting as well. This special election was called after the previous incumbent, Republican Senator Jennifer Kiggins, resigned on November 15th after being elected to represent Virginia's 2nd congressional district. This district has swung between both parties in recent memory. In 2019, Kiggins won her seat by less than 1%. Democratic President Joe Biden won the district in 2020 by 10 points. And then Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin won the district by 4 points. So it's definitely going to be a very competitive district for both parties. What can you tell us about the candidates running, Joel?
Yeah, so the 2 candidates in this race are Democrat Aaron Rouse and Republican Kevin Adams. Rouse played safety in both the NFL and the United Football League for a couple of years, and he's an at-large member of the Virginia Beach City Council. Adams is a retired U.S. Navy lieutenant commander, and he has founded and operated a handyman business since he's retired. And another aspect to this race is of the 40-person chamber, there's 21 Democrats and 18 Republicans right now. And Republicans are hoping to flip the chamber in the elections this fall. So Democratic victory here would give that side a little bit more breathing room heading into the fall elections, whereas a Republican winning would maintain that really tight 21-19 split.
And whoever's elected in this race would only serve until the November elections, correct? And then would be up for election in November?
Yep, that's right. They would only serve through the fall.
Well, that's all of the special elections we're covering next week. Thank you for coming on, Joel, to help break them down for us. I wish you the best of luck in your 10,000-minute Peloton challenge.
Hey everyone, this is Jeff Palais, Ballotpedia's editor-in-chief. When we started Ballotpedia in 2006, our goal was to reach the few thousand political junkies a year with our balanced encyclopedic information. But thanks to the support of people like you, we now reach an audience of millions per year, from journalists and policymakers to everyday citizens researching their ballots. This is only possible because of donations from people like you, who share our belief that our democracy can become stronger by more voters knowing about the candidates and issues on their ballots. Check out the link in our show notes to learn more about how you can support Ballotpedia and learn more about how we put your tax-deductible gift to work.
Happy New Year, everyone. 2022 may be over, but the trivia never is. Even when I'm sick, I make sure you get your weekly fill of fun facts. You deserve nothing less. It's Footnote Facts with me, Paul Rader. We're going to piggyback off Victoria and Joel's conversation, and wasn't that a great conversation, and talk some more about state legislative special elections, specifically for the years 2010 to 2022. But first, today's trivia question for you to answer. Between 2010 and 2022, how many states did not have a state legislative special election? 3 points if you can figure it out. So as was mentioned earlier, Mississippi and Virginia are having special elections in their state legislatures coming up on January 10th. Those are pretty common occurrences for those states from 2010 to 2022. Mississippi had 45 legislative special elections and Virginia had 38 of them, which ranked 6th and 8th among all states respectively. Georgia actually had the most with 71, way ahead of second place Pennsylvania with 54. That may be partially due to the sizes of those state legislatures, leaving more potential for special elections, though that is by no means a perfect correlation, as you'll see with the answer to today's trivia question. What is also more common are special elections occurring during odd-numbered years, as Joel touched on earlier. 2018 was an aberration in that it had the most special elections in that 2010 to 2022 timeframe, with 99 of them, despite being an even-numbered year. 2017 was just behind that with 98 special legislative elections, but excluding 2018, every odd-numbered year had more special elections than any even-numbered year in that time period. That might be due in part to odd-numbered years often being in the middle of state legislative terms, though Mississippi and Virginia are 2 of the 4 states that have regularly scheduled state legislative elections in odd-numbered years. And as was talked about in the earlier segment, the Mississippi seat and 2 of the Virginia seats were held by Republicans, while the other Virginia seat was held by a Democrat. Small sample size, of course, but it's somewhat comparable to the partisan averages for the past 13 years. A per-year average of about 38 of these special elections were for seats that had been held by Republicans, and for Democrats, it was an average of about 37. The years that had the most special elections for Republican-held seats was 2018 with 57 seats, and for Democrats, it was 2013 with 51 seats. And in 5 of those years in that time frame, there were more Republican-held seats that had special elections. 6 of those years had more Democrat-held seats, and 2 of those years had an equal number of Republican and Democrat-held seats. Now, will we see these January 10th special elections flip between the parties? You'd have to look at polling and campaign spending and so on, of course, but for what it is worth, we haven't seen many flips in Mississippi and Virginia legislative special elections in recent years. From 2010 to 2022, only 2 happened in Mississippi, both Democrat to Republican shifts, and 3 happened in Virginia, 2 of those being Democrat to Republican flips. For comparison, New Hampshire had the most flips to Democrats with 11 in that time frame, and Connecticut had the most flips to Republicans with 8. And with that, we return to our trivia question of the week, which is, between 2010 and 2022, how many states did not have a state legislative special election? The answer is 15. And those 15 include a variety of legislature sizes, with bigger legislatures such as Maryland, medium-sized ones such as West Virginia, and smaller ones such as Nevada. And if you answer correctly, you get 15 points for 15 states. That's it on my end. Probably a good thing so I can try to nap away this sickness, although it does make my voice sound cooler. And now for Victoria to finish things off.
Thanks, Paul, and I hope you feel better soon. That's all for this week's episode of On the Ballot. Thanks again to Joel and Paul for coming on the show today. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back next week with an update on election legislation tracking. Until then, if you have any questions, comments, or love for Ballotpedia, feel free to send it to us at ontheballot@ballotpedia.org or on Twitter @Ballotpedia. I'm Victoria Rose. Happy New Year, and thanks for listening.